have you ever given someone a piece of your heart, wrapped in velvet, passed down through decades, only to watch them roll their eyes like it meant nothing? I'm Marlene, and this is the story of the day my daughter unwrapped a pair of vintage Cartier earrings, and nearly lost more than she realized. It started with a gift, but what it revealed unraveled everything I thought I'd been holding together. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. I remember that afternoon so clearly, early November, crisp air creeping through the gaps in the window panes, and that little box sitting on the dining table like it had been waiting 40 years to be opened. It was the kind of day where everything felt quiet but too full, like the house itself was holding its breath. I'd spent the morning dusting the living room, fussing with the curtains, wiping down the good china that hadn't seen daylight since Easter. I made Taryn's favorite, well, what used to be her favorite when she was still in high school, roasted butternut squash with maple glaze and a pecan pie I baked from scratch. She didn't eat pie anymore. Something about sugar spikes and tracking macros now. When she arrived, it was just like always, stylish, polished, distant. She parked her sleek rental in front of my old Craftsman, stepped out like she was visiting a museum of someone else's life. She gave me that quick, polite smile and a side hug that never quite landed. "Oh, you made those roasted vegetables again," she said, already glancing at her phone. "That's sweet." She didn't take off her coat. I told her to sit, poured us both tea in my floral china, and tried not to notice that she kept her phone face up on the table. The conversation was light, surface level. Work was crazy, her marketing team at Meridian was a mess, and LA traffic was as stupid as ever. Then I reached under the table and brought out the small velvet box I'd wrapped in cream paper. I had tucked a handwritten note inside, just a few lines, because I didn't want it to feel like a lecture. Just something from me to her. She unwrapped it quickly. Pulled back the lid. Looked at the earrings. Cartier, from 1974. I'd worn them on the night Walter and I celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. Candlelight, good wine, and a quiet kind of happiness that doesn't announce itself until it's gone. Taryn blinked once, maybe twice, then gave a small, breathy laugh. She didn't pick them up. Just said, "Oh, that's sweet. Not really my style though." Then came the eye roll. Subtle. Fast. So fast it might have seemed unintentional, if I hadn't been watching her as closely as I always do. She closed the box and set it aside like it was something mildly amusing from a thrift store. My smile stayed on my face like a stubborn band-aid, but inside, something cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a shift. A cold place that used to be warm. I nodded, said something like, "That's all right, sweetheart," and pushed the plate of roasted squash a little closer to her. She didn't notice. She was already telling me about some influencer she met at a conference. I'd held on to those earrings for over 4 decades. Through the hospital nights when Walter was sick. Through Taryn's college years and her too brief marriage. Through birthdays and Christmases and all the times I almost gave them to her but thought, not yet. Not until she's ready. But there I was, 50 feet from the closet where I'd hidden that box all those years, wondering why I ever believed she would see them the way I did. A few days earlier, Joyce had come over with her usual cinnamon scones and her usual, unfiltered opinions. She'd seen me polishing the earrings and said, "You sure you want to give those up? Not everyone knows the worth of a thing, especially if it shines." I laughed at the time. I told her not to be so dramatic. But her words clung to me now like the last few leaves on the maple out front, stubborn, holding on, refusing to fall until the moment felt right. Taryn didn't stay long. She had a dinner planned back in the city, someone's birthday, maybe her boyfriend's friend or coworker. I didn't ask. She hugged me again, lighter this time, and said, "Thanks for everything, Mom." Really? I opened the door for her. It was already dark outside, and the porch light buzzed softly overhead. "I hope you have a great week," I said, my voice steady. She nodded, smiled distractedly, and walked to her car without looking back. I stood there for a moment after she drove off, the night settling around me. I still had the box in my hand, light now, too light. I hadn't realized I was still holding it. And right there, in the hush that followed her departure, I felt something shift again. Not a break this time. Not a crack. A quiet rearrangement. I didn't know what to call it yet. But I knew, with certainty, that something in me had started to change. 3 days after Taryn left, I found myself sitting at my usual table by the window at the Orange Finch. The same chip table with the wobbly leg and the faded tile top. I had my notebook open in front of me, lined pages half filled with things I never said out loud. I kept flipping it back and forth, hoping the words would come, but nothing stuck. Not even a grocery list. Outside, leaves blew in messy circles across the sidewalk, smacking against the glass in short bursts. The kind of wind that made you wrap your scarf twice even if it wasn't that cold. It was a gray day. One of those washed-out mornings where the sky can't decide if it wants to cry or just stay silent. Joyce spotted me from across the room and walked over with her paper bag of bakery goods and that knowing look she always wore when she sensed I wasn't doing as well as I claimed. "Got your favorite," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Snickerdoodle and a tangerine scone. I know you pretend not to like sweet things, but I've been watching you devour them for 10 years. I smiled, just a twitch of my mouth. "I'm not pretending. I just ration joy." She tilted her head. "Uh-huh. And what's today's ration?" I tapped the notebook. Blank pages. They're less demanding than people. Joyce didn't laugh, but she didn't look away, either. She reached into her bag and pulled out a rolled-up magazine, placing it gently on the table between us. "Thought you'd want this," she said. "There's a spread on coastal train rides in here. You always said you wanted to try one." I marked the page. I nodded, but the magazine stayed untouched. She sipped her tea and looked at me the way she does, not with pity, just patience. Then she asked, casually, like she already knew the answer, "How'd the birthday go?" I hesitated. She stopped by. "Had lunch?" I gave her the earrings. Joyce raised an eyebrow. "And?" I shrugged. She said it wasn't her style. Joyce didn't speak for a moment. She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing just slightly. She rolled her eyes, didn't she? I looked down at my hands. "Not that it matters." Joyce let out a soft breath through her nose. That girl still hasn't learned how to look her mother in the eye. I didn't want to get into it. Not really. But I heard myself talking anyway. "I kept those earrings through everything, Joyce. Walter gave them to me the night he said I made life feel like jazz, unpredictable, but better with rhythm." I smiled a little at the memory. I wore them to every wedding, every anniversary dinner. I thought, maybe Taryn would wear them to something important one day. Joyce's voice came softer now. "She will. Just not for the reasons you hoped." I looked up. She didn't even ask where they were from. She didn't know they were Cartier? Joyce asked, and when I shook my head, she actually blinked. "Well, damn. That got my attention." "Why do you say that like you know something?" She reached for her bag again, pulled out her reading glasses, and rested them on the tip of her nose. "Marlene. I worked part-time at Alder Antler in my 20s. You know, before I went to nursing school. I've seen real vintage pieces. Your earrings? They're the real deal. Easily 30, maybe 40,000, depending on market." I sat back, stunned. "You're sure?" She gave me a look. As sure as I am that your tea's getting cold. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I knew Walter had taste. He'd bought them during a trip to San Francisco in the 70s, in one of those little shops tucked away behind velvet curtains. He'd saved for months, said he wanted something timeless. But I'd never told Taryn. Not once. I wanted her to love them because I did. Because they were ours, not because they were expensive. Joyce folded her hands on the table. You know, not everyone's ready to understand love that doesn't come with a price tag. And not everyone grows up learning how to see past the wrapping. I gave a weak laugh. She doesn't have time for sentiment. She has meetings. Campaign launches. She's building something. Joyce leaned in, eyes steady. That doesn't mean you have to hand her the bricks. I didn't respond. Couldn't, really. Later that night, I went home and opened the drawer beside my bed. The box was still there, the earrings nestled neatly inside, quiet like old friends waiting for their turn to be useful again. I stared at them for a long time. And I thought, if I died tomorrow, would she find them? Would she understand what they meant? Or would she take them to someone who'd quote a number and say, "It's worth this much"? I closed the drawer. It was late, nearly midnight, when I saw it. I hadn't meant to open Instagram. I was just scrolling through emails, trying to delete junk and unsubscribe from catalogs I no longer needed. But there it was, Taryn's story, glowing at the top of my screen like a flame I should have known better than to touch. She was at some rooftop place in Los Angeles. Dim lighting, wine glasses raised, laughter frozen mid-shot. Her friends were stylish, loud, all teeth and angles. But what caught my eye wasn't them. It was the earrings. She was wearing them. My earrings. Except, they didn't feel like mine anymore. Not the way she held her face toward the camera, tilting just enough so the light caught the shine. Not with the caption floating over her smile like it was no big deal. Some sweet retro piece from my mom. Cute for an old lady vibe? I read it twice. 3 times. My thumb hovered, uncertain whether to tap away or tap closer. I froze there, my breathing suddenly too loud for the room. It wasn't that she wore them. That would have been enough, honestly. Enough for me to think, maybe she was warming to them after all. But that caption, those few words, managed to say everything she never would. That I was quaint. That I was a story to be chuckled at. That even the most sentimental part of me had a punchline. I reached for the phone, thumb fumbling over her contact. I hit call without thinking. It rang twice, then clicked into voicemail. Hey, you've reached Taryn, leave it if it's urgent, or text me like a normal person. Her voice, so upbeat and casual, cut deeper than I expected. I didn't leave a message. For the first time since she left for college, I didn't ask her to call me back. I sat for a while in the kitchen, staring at the dark window above the sink. My reflection stared back, blurry, softened by time. Then I went to the mirror in the hallway, the one Walter had insisted we hang low enough so I wouldn't have to stand on my toes. It had a small crack in the corner where Taryn once tossed a book in frustration, years ago. I never got it fixed. I stood there, staring at myself. I reached up and removed the earrings I'd been wearing, cheap studs, nothing fancy. They felt heavier than they should have, as if they carried the weight of something I hadn't named yet. Looking into my own eyes, I whispered, when did I start apologizing just for being here? It wasn't really a question. Not one I needed answered. There was a knock at the door. Soft, familiar. Joyce. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. She never did. She held up a thick album wrapped in an old dish towel. Found this while digging through the attic, she said. Figured you could use a reminder of who you used to be. We sat on the couch. She opened the album gently, like something sacred. There were pictures of me and Walter, dancing, laughing, covered in flour during a baking class we never finished. And Taryn, small and wide-eyed, clinging to Walter's neck like he was the whole world. Joyce turned a page and paused. You know, she said quietly, I remember that look in his eyes when he watched you. Like you lit up a room he didn't even know was dark. I didn't say anything. She looked over at me. You were the spark, March. And you've spent years letting yourself dim, just so no one else would feel outshone. I looked at a photo of myself in my 30s, hair big, smile bigger. God, I missed her. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Taryn. Some people asked about the earrings. Do you remember where you bought them? If it's a real brand, I might bring them to an appraiser. There was no greeting. No warmth. Just a question about market value. Joyce saw my expression before I even showed her the screen. What does she think? She asked, voice tight. That you picked them up at a yard sale? I didn't answer. I just turned the phone over, screen down on the coffee table. Then I reached over and held the album to my chest for a long, still moment. Finally, I said, she doesn't want the story. She wants the receipt. Joyce didn't reply. She didn't have to. I got up, walked to the counter, and powered the phone off. Not silent. Not do not disturb. Off. I'm not doing this tonight, I said to no one in particular. Not anymore. And I meant it. Because in that moment, with the old photos in my lap and the cold glass of the window behind me, I finally saw it plain. The phone rang just before 8. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table with my third cup of tea, staring at the condensation sliding down the window. November had finally settled into its full gray form, wet, impatient, and a little too quiet. I saw her name flash on the screen. Taryn. I didn't move right away. Just let it ring twice before I answered. Hi, Mom? Listen, her voice was different, tight, a little unsteady. I took the earrings to get looked at. There's this place, Aldine Appraisal. One of my friends swore by them. I didn't say anything. Just waited. They said they're Cartier. From 1974. A rare line. The appraiser asked if I knew the history, and I didn't know what to tell him. He said they're worth over $30,000. There was a pause on the line. I heard her breathing, quick, almost shallow. I mean, are you sure you want me to have them? I didn't realize they were that valuable. My fingers tightened slightly on the ceramic mug. I stood and walked to the living room, where the morning light barely reached. I spoke slowly. I kept them for 42 years. Through 2 moves, 1 house fire, and the entire stretch of your childhood. They weren't just valuable, Taryn. They were treasured. Another pause. If you want them back. I cut her off. Not sharply. Just enough. I thought you'd understand their worth without needing someone to assign them a price. She exhaled, shaky. I'm sorry. If I came off as dismissive. I didn't mean to. Maybe I should have asked more questions earlier. I just didn't think. Her words were cautious, crafted. Like a press release. I could almost see her, pacing in some polished apartment, voice low so her neighbors wouldn't hear she was being talked to by her mother. I let a beat pass, then said, I don't need them back. I just hope you know how to carry something that was given in love, not currency. The line was quiet for a second too long. Then she mumbled something about having to jump on another call, and that she'd be in touch. I hung up before she did. I didn't feel angry. Not exactly. Just tired. In a way that settled deep into my ribs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed around midnight and lit the candle Joyce gave me last Christmas, the lavender one with the wooden wick that crackled like a tiny fire. I opened my notebook, the one I always said I'd turn into a memoir but never quite did. And I wrote. I used to think that love meant giving without question. Without limit. But if I give until there's nothing left of me, what exactly am I offering? An outline? A shadow? An echo? I closed the book without signing my name. I didn't need to. The words belong to me now. The next morning, Joyce dropped by. She always had a sixth sense about these things. Get dressed, she said without even coming in. There's a pottery co-op over on Union. They have a drop-in class at 10. I blinked at her. Pottery? She grinned. You know? Clay. Dirt. Stuff that gets under your nails and reminds you you've got hands. I hesitated. I haven't made anything in decades. All the more reason to start, she said. You don't have to be good. You just have to be curious. We ended up at a little studio that smelled like wet earth and black coffee. People were chatting in quiet circles. A woman with silver hair showed me how to center a lump of clay. My first bowl looked like a crushed hat. But it was mine. And for once, I didn't care if it was perfect. That afternoon, while making tea, I logged into my bank account. For the last 4 years, I'd been sending Taryn a monthly transfer, just to help, I always said. Even though she never asked. Even though she made more than I did in her first year out of grad school. I scrolled to the automatic payment. Paused. Then clicked cancel. No explanation. No farewell note. No guilt. Just a quiet ending to something I should have stopped long ago. Because I didn't want to keep paying rent for space in her life. Not anymore. We walked into the pottery studio like two women who'd lost our names and were trying to shape new ones out of clay. The air inside smelled of damp earth and burnt coffee, and everything echoed in a soft, calming way, voices bouncing off shelves filled with crooked bowls and little ceramic birds. Joyce had signed us up for a trial class. I hadn't touched clay since high school. My hands felt clumsy, like I didn't quite belong in them. I stared at the wheel like it might bite me. Joyce sat across the room, already elbow-deep in slip, chatting with a woman in a tie-dye apron. She caught my eye and grinned like this was all perfectly normal. The instructor came over, a man maybe in his 40s, with calloused fingers and a voice like warm soup. He showed me how to center the clay, how to keep my elbows in, how to breathe. I nodded like I understood, but inside, I was unraveling. I wasn't Marlene, mother of Taryn. I wasn't Mrs. Whitaker, widow of Walter. I was just some woman trying to make a bowl that didn't cave in on itself. And when the clay finally did fold, collapsing sideways into a sad little slump, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it felt real. Like proof that I was still allowed to mess up something that wasn't permanent. After class, Joyce patted my shoulder and said, "You made something with your hands. That's evidence you're still here." I wanted to say thank you, but the words caught behind my ribs. That night, after a lukewarm dinner of leftover lentil soup, I sat in the living room scrolling mindlessly, trying to distract myself from the ache that had settled somewhere between my shoulders. I hadn't checked Taryn's blog in weeks. I don't know why I opened it. Habit, maybe. Some sick version of longing. Her latest post was about investment strategies for creatives, how to reclaim capital from stagnant assets. The tone was polished, like always. But there was one line, tucked toward the bottom, that stopped me cold. Even old gifts can be liquidated to fund something better. My body didn't move for a full minute. My eyes stayed fixed on those words like they might shift if I stared long enough. But they didn't. She was talking about the earrings. My earrings. Walter's last real gift. The ones I had chosen not just to give her, but to pass on, as part of something whole and honest. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat, hands folded on the table, staring at the empty chairs across from me. The room had never felt quieter. Not even after Walter died. He used to sit in that very chair, always leaning back a little too far, arms crossed behind his head. I could still hear his voice sometimes, tucked into corners of the house. You don't have to prove you're a good wife, Em. You already are. That was the thing with Walter, he saw me long before I figured out how to see myself. It was almost midnight when I took out a sheet of stationery and wrote something I didn't plan to send. If you're going to trade love for profit, make sure it's your own to give. Don't pawn off what someone else protected. Don't sell what someone held sacred just because you didn't know how to name it. I folded it once, slid it into the drawer beneath the tea bags. The next day, Joyce stopped by, cheeks pink from the cold. She stood in the kitchen, fidgeting with her gloves. Talk to my friend Donna, you remember her, the one who works part-time at that appraisal place, she said, voice tight. Taryn brought the earrings in. Said she was asking about selling. I closed the dishwasher, quietly. She said when Donna suggested she hang on to them, Taryn just shrugged and said, sentiment doesn't pay bills. The floor felt too firm under my feet. I nodded. That was all I could manage. Later that evening, I stood by the front window and watched the first snow of the season come down in slow, lazy spirals. It was early for snow, but not impossible. I wrapped the shawl tighter around my shoulders and stayed there for a long while. And then, quietly, without fanfare, something inside me turned. Maybe I'd been loving the wrong way. Maybe I'd given too much without asking anything back. She showed up just after 6, without calling ahead. I saw her car through the kitchen window while I was slicing an apple. She didn't even park straight, angled across the driveway like she'd made the decision halfway through another. I didn't rush to the door. When I opened it, she was standing there in her camel coat, arms crossed, face tight in that way she gets when she's rehearsed something but already knows it won't land. I was in town, she said, like it explained everything. I stepped back to let her in, but I didn't smile. Not this time. She looked around like the house had changed since she last visited. It hadn't. Same quilt on the couch, same faint smell of lemon oil on the floors. She sat, but only on the edge of the armchair, like she had somewhere else to be. I just want to explain, she said. I sat across from her. Waited. I wasn't going to sell them, she said quickly. I mean, yes, I asked. But it was just to get a sense of what they were. I thought maybe I misunderstood, Anne. I didn't think they were worth that much. That's all. That's not all, I said, calm but steady. You wrote about it. You used the phrase liquidate. You turned a gift into leverage. Taryn shifted. You read the blog? You posted it publicly. She looked down, smoothed a wrinkle from her coat. It wasn't meant to sound like that. You misunderstood. No, I said, sharper now. I understood just fine. You didn't know how to hold something without measuring it first. You only see value when it's stamped in dollars. She sat back, exhaling hard. You act like I've never appreciated anything. But growing up, Mom, you never said what you felt. You just hovered. Made dinner. Paid bills. Smiled through everything. I didn't know what was real. I thought love was enough, I said softly. Taryn laughed, dry, not unkind. You think that's love? Silence and waiting? My voice didn't rise, but it cut just the same. I became a ghost in my own home so you'd never have to feel guilt. I let you rewrite every version of me that fit your comfort. You say I didn't speak, But that was because every time I tried, you turned away. She swallowed hard. Her fingers clenched in her lap. Do you have any idea what it's like to do everything alone? She said, lower now. No one building anything for me. No map, no safety net. Just me, figuring it out as I went. And who do you think was holding the net while you walked away? I asked. She looked at me then. For real. Like maybe, she was seeing me not as a fixture, but as a person. But I didn't flinch. I didn't lean in. I kept my voice even. I'm not angry anymore, Taryn. But I am done. She blinked. What does that mean? It means you don't have to come here out of guilt. You don't have to explain or justify or defend. I'm not asking for your love, and I'm not going to trade for it. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I stood, walked to the cabinet, and took down the small black box. I held it between us like a peace offering, but there was no peace in it. Take them back, I said. Not as a gift. Just, take them. I don't want to hold on to anything that reminds me I was once trying to be enough. She hesitated. Then took the box with both hands, slower than I expected. I don't know what to say, she murmured. You don't have to say anything, I replied. Not this time. She rose, adjusted the strap of her purse, and turned toward the door. I followed but didn't walk her out. She paused at the threshold, looked at me like she might speak, but I reached gently for the knob and opened the door instead. She stepped outside. The cold hit her in the face. She didn't look back. I closed the door, not hard, not loud. But it clicked with finality. I sat in the kitchen, folded the dish towel I'd been using, and looked out into the backyard. The wind had knocked over a planter, and a few dead leaves skated across the deck. The next morning, I didn't do what I always did. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't reread old messages or check to see if Taryn had posted something that might crack the shell of the night before. I didn't write anything in my notebook or start a letter I'd never send. Instead, I stripped the bed and opened the hallway closet. There were boxes shoved far back behind the linens. One held baby clothes I'd saved even though I'd promised myself I wouldn't be sentimental. Another was filled with holiday crafts Taryn made in elementary school, paper turkeys, bent pipe cleaner angels. The last one was heavier. Cards, pictures, trinkets from her college years. A theater program from a play she dropped out of. Graduation announcements. An envelope with a lock of her hair from her first haircut. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything out. I just opened each box, looked through it slowly, and then closed it again. I took all three down to the basement and stacked them neatly next to the bookshelf Walter built in '89. They didn't need to be in the hallway closet anymore. That space could be for something new. That afternoon, Joyce came by with a cooler and a folded picnic blanket. I'm kidnapping you, she said. No special occasion. Just Thursday and the weather's not miserable. She didn't ask if I wanted to go. She just waited while I grabbed a jacket. We drove up to Blakely Lake, where the water sat like glass and the air smelled like pine needles and dry leaves. A few families were out walking dogs. No music, no crowds, just the sound of nature minding its own business. Joyce spread the blanket and opened the cooler. She'd packed sharp cheddar, grapes, almonds, and little sandwiches cut into triangles. I used to make these for Peter's soccer games, she said. Back when I was still married and pretending that mattered. We ate in silence for a while. Not awkward. Just easy. After a long stretch, she leaned back on her elbows and looked at me. You good? She asked. I nodded. Yeah. I think I finally am. The breeze picked up a little, rustling the leaves behind us. I used to think if something ended, it meant I'd failed, I said. That if love faded or fell apart, I'd wasted it. And now I think, I did love. Completely. With all I had. And that counts. Even if it didn't get returned the way I wanted. Joyce smiled without saying anything. Just reached over and squeezed my hand once before going back to her sandwich. That evening, after I got home, I checked my email for the first time all day. There was one from Taryn. No subject line. Just, I think I get some of it now. Not all. But some. I don't expect you to answer. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I won't keep pulling on the same rope. That's all. No apology. No explanation. But something had shifted. I stared at the screen for a while, then closed the laptop. Not out of anger. Not out of sadness. Just, enough. That night, I signed up for the full pottery class, 8 weeks, Wednesday evenings. And while I was at it, I clicked through a site I'd bookmarked last winter, a travel group that ran small tours for women over 50. There was one listed for New England in the fall. 6 days. Covered bridges, train rides, antique shops. Quiet mornings. No expectations. I booked it. I didn't ask anyone if I should. I didn't weigh what it meant. I just chose it. Before I went to bed, I wrote something on a small square of paper and taped it to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, right above the mugs. You don't have to be good. You just have to be free. I read it once before turning out the light. I packed slowly, folding each sweater like I was folding a page of my own life. A small carry-on, a sturdy shoulder bag, and the itinerary Joyce printed for me when I told her I'd finally booked the New England trip. 6 days. Covered bridges. Cool air. No obligations. I stood there in my bedroom for a moment, looking at the neatly zipped suitcase on the bench at the foot of the bed. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't thinking about who might need me while I was gone. I wasn't leaving a note behind. No frozen casserole with instructions, no spare key under the mat just in case, no envelope with emergency numbers in the drawer. That part of me had gone quiet. Not bitter, just at peace. Joyce came by right before I left for the airport. She handed me a brown paper bag with her usual blend of loose-leaf tea and a small, folded envelope tucked inside. She tapped the top of the bag. Open this when you're somewhere that feels brand new. I smiled. Thank you. Enjoy the quiet, she said, then added with that half-smirk she always wore when saying something true, you don't need someone sitting beside you to feel like you're exactly where you belong. After she left, I sat for a while in the living room, alone but not lonely. And without warning, a memory found me, a birthday from decades ago. Taryn must have been 6 or 7. I'd gotten her a plastic makeup kit from the corner store. Nothing fancy, just pink blush and fake lipstick in little glittery tubes. When she opened it, her eyes lit up like she'd just been handed treasure. She squealed and threw her arms around me, the kind of hug that knocked the wind right out of your lungs. There was a time when I was all she needed. Just being there was enough. But then, somehow, it wasn't. I shook off the memory as gently as it had arrived. I was zipping up my coat when the doorbell rang. No one was there. Just a small cardboard box on the porch. Inside was the Cartier box, and a note. The handwriting was unmistakable. I think you should keep these. Or at least, don't let anyone else decide what they're worth. No greeting. No signature. Just that. I held the box for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do with it, but because I finally did. I didn't feel joy or closure or the sting of old pain. I felt stillness. The kind that comes when something finally lands after floating for too long. I walked to my bedroom and opened the top drawer of my nightstand. The box fit perfectly beside the other quiet things I kept: old photos, a ribbon from my wedding bouquet, Walter's watch. I didn't take the earrings with me. I didn't need to. Some things don't have to be worn to be honored. Some things don't lose meaning just because they're not seen. They're still beautiful, still real. Still mine. Later, at the airport, I stood near the window while the sun rose through the glass. The terminal was buzzing with voices and luggage wheels and boarding calls, but none of it touched me. I caught my reflection in the pane, gray hair tucked under a knit cap, lips bare but calm, eyes open. I looked like someone who didn't owe anyone an explanation. A woman no longer carrying proof of what she gave, only what she kept. There was no one waving goodbye. No one waiting on the other end with a welcome sign. And still, nothing felt missing. I took out my boarding pass, slid it into my coat pocket, and picked up my bag. As I walked toward my gate, I heard my own voice, low and quiet but certain, somewhere deep inside. I don't know what's waiting for me out there. But I do know this: I'm not going back to being someone even I couldn't recognize. I guess, looking back now, from where I stand in my 70s, it wasn't really about the earrings. It was about finally seeing myself clearly, after years of squinting through everyone else's expectations. If you've ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, or held your breath hoping someone would love you better, maybe you'll understand what I mean. Tell me, have you ever reached your limit not with a bang, but with a quiet no more? If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stay with me for the next one. We're all still learning how to come home to ourselves.